How far would you go to keep the flame of your passion alive? The same flame that feeds your family. Would you endure corrupt politicians or DEA agents putting rifles in your face? What about people trying to rob you of that flame? An entire city government wanting to extinguish it. How would you keep that flame alive? When I think about the OG Los Angeles cannabis companies that have thrived throughout the rise of the recreational market, I think about a collective of cultivators, individuals set on playing with fire, a company I've personally been aware of since the 8th grade. I'm talking about the Jungle Boys. But who is the leader of this urban collective of cultivators? Meet Ivan. Ivan is a Santa Fe Springs-born grower and has worked in and throughout the cannabis industry for the last 20 years. In this episode, we will explore Ivan's story and the history of the Jungle Boys. Playing with fire has been the Jungle Boys motto for a while now, and as we will see, for Ivan and the Jungle Boys, playing with fire has bloomed into a completely new world. Welcome to High Design. My name is LMC. Thank you for joining me. Please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, and strap in. This one is going to be good. As a child, Ivan grew up around cannabis plants. His mom had plants in their backyard, and eventually when Ivan was a teenager, he joined his mom and started growing cannabis himself as a hobby. His mom nurtured his hobby and would give him advice on growing and tips to avoid unwanted attention, like topping the tall sativa plants so it didn't grow over the fence in their backyard. Ivan's mother nurtured a hobby that would turn into a passion that would make Ivan the legendary cultivator we know today. When Ivan was older, his father was diagnosed with advanced cancer. His father tried radiotherapy and chemotherapy to help improve his health, but neither worked. A doctor recommended Ivan's father try medical marijuana. At the time, California had very few dispensaries, but Ivan was able to access one called Toluca Lake Collective. The cannabis from TLC, or Toluca Lake Collective, ended up helping Ivan's father as he fought for his life. Ivan thought that he could start to grow more cannabis himself so his father could have easy and affordable access. At the time, home cultivation of cannabis was still very illegal, yet Ivan pushed forward and set up a few lights in his garage and started to cultivate cannabis that would ease his father's pain. Unfortunately, his father's cancer was in too far of a stage to be able to survive, but Ivan was able to make the last years of his father's life less painful. Ivan's hobby becomes integrated into intimate moments in his life and ultimately contributes to, as we will see, his overall character development. In an interview that Ivan did with Cannabis Now, he explains that back when he was coming up in the late 90s to early 2000s, that really the only place to get info about cannabis cultivation was online in forums. Ivan said that many of the cultivators that he used to talk to online are still his friends today. Some of those friends include OG Raskal, Capulator, Lumpy, Junky, Texas Kid, and many more. Back then, Ivan and others were worried about their IP addresses getting tracked, so they used encrypted programs like the Tor network, which integrated IP scrambling technology, or an onion browser, which was developed by the US Navy and is still used to this day by people all around the world. Many of his grower friends are now in the industry, were from those forums. They all started out the same, cultivating in their garages. Ivan continued to work both in and outside the cannabis industry, working full-time outside the industry while continuing to fall in love with cultivating cannabis. Ivan was putting in 14 to 16-hour work days on the regular. His family was growing, so he needed to be able to pay the bills. Remember Toluca Lake Collective, that dispensary I talked about, where Ivan first tried to get medical cannabis for his dad? Well, he started to work with them. He actually started working in dispensaries like Toluca Lake Collective and Downtown Patient Group. At the same time, the LA medical dispensary scene was starting to get bigger and bigger. The longer Ivan worked with these shops, the more he realized the importance of vertical integration, meaning you control the means of production and retail distribution. He knew the industry was moving towards a more vertically integrated business model, a vertical system that would allow Ivan to provide the best purchasing experience for patients while also providing the best quality product. Ivan opened a dispensary called Nature's Green Cure, which was located in Santa Fe Springs. He also became a partner in the Toluca Lake Collective. Ivan and his team at Nature's Green Cure innovated tactics like keeping a line of communication open with regulators and municipal officials to ensure that the company was compliant. A tactic that today may seem obvious, but back then, that outreach was actually a very new idea. Nature's Green Cure, or NGC, had a grow in the back of the shop with 100 lights, which at the time was pretty massive. In fact, at the time, if you grew more than 100 plants and were caught by federal enforcement, the federal prison sentence could be up to 40 years. But Ivan took the risk to follow his passion. Ivan said in the same Cannabis Now article that I referenced earlier that it was always his vision to grow in many small craft rooms that would produce small batches of high quality cannabis. NGC was also where Ivan and his team started the earliest forms of their large-scale seed propagation operations. Operations for which the Jungle Boys are world famous for. Ivan and his team at NGC had built a strong community of patients and was blazing through the mid to late 2000s. Something I really commend Ivan for is his understanding of the importance of conducting business on a legal basis. He understood that the future of medical cannabis had to be above board to ensure the longevity and growth of himself and the industry. Now, I want to switch gears for a sec. We'll come back to Ivan's story in a little bit, but I want to tell you a story about a man named Joseph Serrano. He had served as a city councilman for Santa Fe Springs from 2003 to 2010. In 2010, Joseph Serrano became the mayor of Santa Fe Springs. In that same year, Serrano started to have meetings with the owner of a medical marijuana dispensary, other than any Ivan was involved in. Serrano told the owner that he could provide information on the city's plan to regulate medical marijuana dispensaries and help him stay in business, for a price of course. Over the course of a little under 1 year, the unnamed dispensary owner paid Serrano a total of $11,500. Now, the first payment to Serrano by the dispensary owner was $1,500, and the other $10,000, well, that was supplied by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI. Yes, the unnamed dispensary owner became an FBI informant, and well, Serrano was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for corruption. The dispensary owner paid Serrano $1,600 a month, which happened to be the cost of his mortgage. Joseph Serrano possessed an antagonistic attitude towards people like Ivan, who were pushing for medical marijuana dispensaries to start operating legally with a business license. Serrano wanted to prevent dispensaries from getting business licenses so that the illegal or gray market could continue to operate. As long as the gray market continued operating, Serrano could be able to continue to capitalize on it. But Serrano's scheme obviously came to an end in 2012 when he was arrested.
I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Serrano.
I have decided to officially resign my position on the Santa Fe Springs City Council. This is a wonderful community that I have been proud to call my home for over 60 years. And I know that I must take responsibility for my actions. It has been a privilege and an honor to serve this community for the past 9 years. In my heart of heart, I would have hoped to continue to do so for many years to come. But now I can only ask for your forgiveness. Resolve around my actions and mine alone. Thank you.
Just when Ivan thought he was able to continue to push for policies that would legitimize the medical cannabis industry in California, in 2013, the U.S. Justice Department sent out its first round of letters to California property owners, saying that if they were renting property to any cannabis retailers, then they themselves would have to face prosecution by the federal government. At the time, Nature's Green Cure, Ivan's company, had been expanding, and Ivan and his team didn't want to risk their freedom, so they decided to shut down the operation for a week to let the dust settle. Ivan was working a ton of hours at 2 separate jobs, and he was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and frustrated. But this experience was confirming one thing for him. Cannabis was his ultimate passion. And like many great entrepreneurs, he took a risk. He quit his regular full-time job, and then took his whole entire life savings and decided to open up a shop in Los Angeles with his partner Juice. We will get to Juice's story later. Ivan ended up actually taking over the Toluca Lake Collective in Los Angeles. Now, let's talk about Proposition D. Proposition D would eventually grant immunity to the first 168 cannabis clubs in the city. Since Ivan took over TLC in 2013, his company was basically grandfathered in. Ivan has gone so far as to state that if Proposition D hadn't passed, he would have a worthless company. And he was right. Now, while Prop D allowed the Jungle Boys to keep operating, it only meant that they were now allowed to pay taxes. But that's all it really did. And the main problem with Prop D was that there was far more dispensaries operating than just the 168 licenses intended. While the Jungle Boys were one of those 168, there was a serious problem with people forging Prop D licenses at the time. This meant that at one point people were literally getting scammed out of millions of dollars because they purchased forged Proposition D licenses or were just scammed through other means. One notable individual carrying out different scams during Proposition D was a man named James Shaw. He had scammed and stolen millions of dollars. In 2019, a California court awarded a record amount of damages to date involving the cannabis business to Shaw's victims. The case was filed in 2016, and in 2019, the court ruled he would have to pay damages of $4.3 million. So we can see that there was a massive amount of fraudulent activities going on, and people were losing millions. The initial year of Prop D in Los Angeles brought about a time of chaos and confusion, but the Jungle Boys managed to make it out the other side of the chaos. The Jungle Boys and a number of their friends that had Prop D licenses learned how to spot a forgery, but more so the events surrounding Prop D forced them to be extremely meticulous and diligent when it came to verifying licenses and documents. They were also insanely on top of their compliance and made sure to always turn in taxes and other required papers into the city of Los Angeles on time. If you wanted to own a dispensary and run a cannabis business that had any sort of future or longevity at the time, you had to be on your shit. And Ivan and his team were insanely on their shit. Later in 2013, after Prop D had passed, Ivan and TLC were moving to a new location where they are still to this day. Now, let's address the insane 13-year lawsuit the Jungle Boys had with the city of Los Angeles. The city argued that it wasn't complying with the city's cannabis laws, but like I said earlier, Ivan and his team were insanely on top of their shit and knew that wasn't true. Do you want to know the argument the city was trying to make? The city argued that they dropped off the form stating that they were moving locations at the wrong municipal office. The city said that they were only supposed to drop off the form to the downtown municipal office, not their satellite office in Van Nuys, California. An office specifically built so that people didn't have to drive downtown. The convolution is deafening. Ivan said in an interview a number of years back, quote, "They took our paperwork, accepted it, stamped it, and then sent it to downtown." Yes, the city of Los Angeles was that petty, and literally broke their own policies and made up imaginary regulations to try to shut down the Jungle Boys. To make matters worse, at the same time, Ivan and TLC were being sued by 2 other groups. One being the local grocery store located right next to the new TLC location, and the other one was a billionaire who I'm not going to name because, well, I'm sure you can figure out why. Anyways, this billionaire was running a massive cannabis fund. He was part of the first generation of asshole multimillionaires or billionaires that thought the cannabis industry was going to be easy to succeed in, with tons of money backing them. This billionaire was suing Ivan and the Jungle Boys because there was a rule that cannabis retailers or collectives cannot be within 600 feet of each other. And the billionaire and his associates had bought all of the property around the area planning to open up a medical shop. The billionaire wanted the Jungle Boys to sell their store to him at a cheap price, and they refused to. Apparently, when Ivan came face to face with the main partner of this billionaire at a meeting they had, the partner of the billionaire offered a $5 million bet to Ivan, saying they would own the TLC store in 2 weeks because they had political ties and that would help them. And Ivan agreed to the bet, and they shook hands. Little did the partner of the billionaire know that Ivan and his team had registered the location one day before they had, and that the city went by whoever turns in their paperwork first gets priority. When Ivan is running low on funds, he will send a text to the partner of the billionaire asking when he could get that $5 million, never receiving a response. And wait, did I forget to mention that they also had the Catholic Church protesting outside of their TLC shop during this time period every single day, actively petitioning the government and others to shut the Jungle Boys down. Also, for context, the Jungle Boys were trying to get ready for cannabis legalization in California at this same time. But we have to realize that at the time, Ivan and the Jungle Boys were getting sued by 3 different parties, and all they really had was each other and their practices of discipline and resilience they had built over the years. So the billionaire and his associates lost the lawsuit against the Jungle Boys. The protesters from the church eventually stopped their ridiculous protest. The lawsuit from the local grocery store ended in a settlement, and eventually, after 13 long years, the city of Los Angeles finally dropped the lawsuit. Another dimension of adversity that the Jungle Boys and many other cannabis growers around the world have had to deal with is robbery. But the Jungle Boys have had a pretty insane lineup over the years when it comes to people trying to break into their facilities and steal their flower. The same year that all of these lawsuits were occurring, there was one insane robbery where a few people broke into their TLC location by literally tunneling under the ground from another property and into one of their grow rooms. Yeah, they pulled an El Chapo escaping from prison move. Fucking wild. They stole millions worth of plants, and yeah, you can bet that the Jungle Boys security got heavily ramped up after that. Even after the many times of robbery or attempted robbery, the Jungle Boys continued to persevere and move forward. Now, let's go back to the current TLC location, which they moved to and which triggered the lawsuit with the city. So the TLC location is above a CVS, and the area where TLC is located in Boyle Heights is right next to the projects. While the city tried to argue that the Jungle Boys were hurting the communities there, they in fact did the exact opposite. They cleaned up the area, brought thousands of jobs to the neighborhood economy, paid millions over the years in taxes to the city, and they've made many of the businesses located near them extremely successful due to their high volumes of customers. If that's not an economic stimulus and an overall extremely positive contribution to the community, then I don't know what is. So we can see the turbulent history that Ivan and his team had to endure, not because of any mistakes of theirs, but because they were in a tough time period where the federal government and city officials were making their last-ditch efforts to oppress cannabis cultivators. And what's that old cliche saying? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Emerging from the years of struggle and perseverance, Ivan and the Jungle Boys were finally free from a battle with the city of Los Angeles and many others. Ivan's partner from the beginning is someone named Roberto, better known as Juice. Together, the two have struggled and endured through a plethora of different obstacles that came their way. Ivan met Juice around 2006 when Juice was running a medical marijuana shop in Chinatown. Ivan would sell flower to Juice's shop. Juice and Ivan got to know each other, staying in touch and talking cultivation. One month, they both had their medical shops raided and shut down by the feds. They decided they would start cultivating together and became partners. Over time, Ivan would teach Juice all of the cultivation methods he had picked up over the years. Later in 2006, they would start the Jungle Boys, when one day a friend of theirs was looking at their grow. Mind you, Ivan and Juice grew big plants in small pots, and their friend said, quote, "Wow, it looks like a jungle in here." And the name has stuck ever since. These days, Juice runs all operations for Jungle Boys and still works 7 days a week, 12-hour days. I think Ivan and Juice were prone to working together because they both identified with each other's persistent work ethic. Altogether, there are 3 owners: Ivan, Juice, and Pat. Pat is much more behind the scenes and takes care of things like the taxes and other financial compliance. A number of years later, there would be a key individual that came into the fray. His name was Roach. 7 to 8 years ago or so, Roach was a ski bum on Mammoth Mountain, working jobs and skiing as much as he wanted. Roach also worked construction before starting his career in cannabis. That year, him and a friend decided to drive down to the High Times Cannabis Cup to check it out. During this time at High Times, medical dispensaries were able to sell to patients at the festivals, which was what Ivan, Juice, and the rest of the Jungle Boys team was doing. Apparently, Roach was talking with the Jungle Boys for a short period of time, and then just hopped over the booth and started helping them sell product. Ivan looked over and saw this guy Roach helping them sell to patients, and Ivan thought two things. The first, who the fuck is this guy? And the second, wow, this dude can really work hard. A couple weeks later, Ivan asked him if he wanted to work with the Jungle Boys. Roach obliged and began working for them. Roach showed up the first day of work thinking that he was going to become a manager, given how he impressed Ivan and Juice with his work ethic. Ivan showed him around and then took him to his workstation, which ended up being packaging. Roach wasn't the most excited about it, but Ivan told him that everyone at the Jungle Boys has to start at the bottom and work their way up. Sometime after Roach started working there, Ivan had needed help with building a new cultivation facility. Mind you, Ivan designed, built, and did the plumbing for these cultivation facilities himself. So Roach started helping Ivan build them. For a few years, Roach was able to absorb tons of knowledge and know-how from Ivan by spending a lot of time building these facilities with him. Over the years, Roach successfully worked his way up the ladder. Nowadays, he's Ivan's right-hand man, handling design to build out management as well as a ton of other different things. It's fair to say that he does a little bit of everything. Another right-hand man to Ivan and Juice, who helps run the Jungle Boys grow, is someone named Daryl, otherwise known as Debo. Debo is super interesting because he's a super rare kind of person who understands cultivation, but he also understands the business and how business affects the cultivation and how cultivation affects the business. If I had to consider the running theme that Ivan, Juice, Pat, Roach, Debo, and the rest of the Jungle Boy staff all share, it would have to be their absolutely insane work ethic. Together, they have all truly elevated each other's craft. The Jungle Boys are truly a friend and family-owned business. Ivan's daughter is the manager of TLC, his nephews run Cultivation for TLC, and his wife runs Jungle Boys Clothing. Ivan never took big money and has continued to bet on himself and his family, beholden to no one but themselves. There's a good number of Jungle Boys employees that have worked there for a decade or more. Their employee retention rate is far above average, and anyone that has worked in the cannabis industry knows that's extremely hard to do. Ivan, Juice, Pat, Roach, Debo, and the whole team work their ass off, not just for the money or prominence, but because it's their passion. Passion and reliance on a small community of friends and family has helped the Jungle Boys endure through some of the hardest times and come out the other side, more resilient and prepared to take on the next obstacle. In this ever-growing yet infant cannabis industry, you don't see too many companies that have reached the heights of success that the Jungle Boys have, without of course accepting major investment from outside parties. Resilience and trust in one another has made the Jungle Boys a force to be reckoned with. Before we go over the Jungle Boys brand architecture and business strategies that have been really successful, let's talk about a separate story involving Ivan and the CEO of Cookies Cannabis, Berner, the grower and the rapper. In 2017, Ivan and Berner, the CEO of Cookies Cannabis, came together to create the Exotikz cannabis brand. By the way, if you haven't checked out the past episode where we covered Berner and the Cookies Cannabis brand, I highly recommend you go and watch this after. The link will be down below. The Exotikz brand was beloved by many. In an interview, Ivan said, quote, "Well, Berner and myself started Exotikz. So basically, if you took the Jungle Boys brand and Berner's Cookies brand and put them together, you have Exotikz. Exotikz allows us to just have some fun, kind of do what we want. One of the first companies we were working with is Reef Dispensaries," end quote. The CEO of the Reef at the time was a man named Matthew Morgan. Fun fact, he worked for Dan Blazarian at Ignite, and now he's working in the CBD industry. In late 2018, Ivan and Berner were approached by a major Canadian cannabis company that wanted to buy Exotikz. The deal to sell Exotikz fell through. One of the main reasons it fell through was the majority of the compensation in the deal would have been in stock, and Ivan and Berner decided that a ton of Canadian stock from what appeared to be an overvalued company wouldn't be a smart move in the long term. Exotikz had taken up a lot of time for both Berner and Ivan. They decided to put the Exotikz brand on the back burner so they could focus on their own brands more. While the Exotikz brand hasn't been at the forefront for the two, the friendship between Ivan and Berner was just getting started. Indeed, they talk to this day, and while the two legends are for better or for worse on their own paths, they continue to offer advice and support to each other. And well, who knows, Exotikz could be back in their main focus in the near future. Only time will tell. Brand development. The Jungle Boys brand we are familiar with now has been around for years, and they have consistently put out high quality products. This is mostly due in part to their vertically integrated business model, where they control the cultivation, retail, and therefore the customer's overall experience. While it is much harder to operate a vertically integrated business, it ensures a quality product and buying experience. Consistent quality is the foundation of building brand equity, and the Jungle Boys are the best in the business when it comes to that. The Jungle Boys are without a doubt in the top 5 indoor brands in all of California, which is extremely hard to do. When one considers their pricing, the true value of their product is realized. Despite California's extreme taxation on the cannabis market, the Jungle Boys are growing some of the best quality in the industry. They differ from other designer or top-tier brands with affordable pricing at $46 an eighth in total. Other brands in that top tier in California charge anywhere from $65 to $100 an eighth. And there's a reason why the Jungle Boys can barely keep any of their product on the shelves year-round. The Jungle Boys are extremely unique in that they have an insane amount of brand equity with consumers as well as with growers. For years, the Jungle Boys had been blowing up different cultivation companies when it comes to prominence, making them very successful. But one day, one of his friends that owned Athena Nutrients and Luxx Lighting came to them to ask, do you actually want to put out a product? Put out your own lights, put out your own nutrients. Ivan, Juice, and Roach and the rest of the team thought about it and eventually agreed. But there was one condition. Ivan wasn't interested in slapping the Jungle Boys name on some regular old lights and nutrients. The product had to be different and stand out. They had to be novel by way of cultivation and production, innovative and high quality. Ivan and the Jungle Boys continue to blaze new trails through brand equity and the pursuit of newer, fresher developments in the cannabis market. And their entire history can be understood through this ethos. So Ivan and his team worked with Athena and Luxx to develop new products that were innovative and truly helped grow better cannabis. They worked with engineers and scientists from UC Davis to innovate these new products that questioned traditional thought when it came to certain cultivation products, truly trying to innovate. A continuous trend we have seen with the Jungle Boys is their want and need to add value and give back to the industry as a whole. Accompanied by Luxx Lighting and Athena Agriculture, Ivan and the Jungle Boys have expanded their footprint massively without diluting the Jungle Boys brand. Like I mentioned earlier, the Jungle Boys have a ton of brand equity with consumers, but they also have a ton of brand equity within the cannabis industry throughout cultivators. Instead of overexpanding on the consumer side and therefore diluting the brand equity with consumers, the Jungle Boys have leveraged their brand equity in the cultivation space. Luxx Lighting and Athena products are used in every country that allows cannabis cultivation in some form throughout the world. Do you want to grow like commercial cannabis like the Jungle Boys? Well, you can. Athena Nutrients has one of the top quality nutrient companies in the world, yet they sell their products at half the price of other top nutrient companies. Again, the combination of consistent high quality and fair pricing is a running theme for the Jungle Boys, and long term, I believe that will be extremely beneficial. Athena has a highly trained team of facility advisors that will show up to facilities and advise companies on how to properly use the nutrient line correctly. When it comes to Luxx Lighting, they've excelled with not just putting out high quality lighting products, but they've also been extremely successful in their marketing and branding. Luxx Lighting started in 2018, and in only a couple years since then, they have become one of the most talked about cultivation lighting companies in the country. Overall, the tandem of the Jungle Boys, Athena, and Luxx Lighting has been an extremely effective combination in just a matter of a few short years. The influence the Jungle Boys have on cannabis cultivation is truly impressive. Ivan and the Jungle Boys are patient, expanding slowly. In the long term, I think this will really pay off for them. They are dedicated to delivering the best quality product to their customers at a fair price. While there are benefits to licensing out a brand to other growers, such as rapid business growth, there is a risk of not putting out a consistently quality product. which you license your brand out to someone and let other companies grow your product, you inherently are risking that brand equity. And the Jungle Boys aren't willing to risk that. Currently, they have 9 cultivation locations around the city of L.A., and they have 3 stores, TLC, Los Angeles Farmers, and Jungle Boys OC. Florida is the first new market that the Jungle Boys will be entering, where they will continue their business practice of vertical integration. The Jungle Boys' first 1,000 lights will be fully set up by the end of this year. They will have 5 stores opening throughout Florida as well. I think they're going to crush it in Florida. Overall, the Jungle Boys are amazing at playing the long-term game. Playing the long game in an industry like cannabis is what makes billion-dollar companies. If I had to bet all my money on any top-tier craft cannabis company, it would be without a doubt on the Jungle Boys. But that's just me. Ivan and the Jungle Boys have survived the many different eras of California cannabis laws. We have to think about this. The Jungle Boys opened up their first retail store in 2006, and they've been operating years prior. How many cannabis companies do you know that have been around for around 18 years? In this young cannabis industry, that's pretty insane. The chaotic turbulence of the changing regulations and laws of California cannabis industry has refined the Jungle Boys. Resilience created by necessity and powered by passion. When I started to look into Ivan, researching the Jungle Boys' history, I realized the amount of bullshit they had to deal with. People will say that this or that is their passion, but when it really comes down to it, actions are much louder than words. Passion is measured by the amount of adversity one overcomes. And for Ivan and his team, there was a lot of adversity. Ivan has been a leader in the cannabis community throughout the last 20 plus years, and he's been a leader that stood on his principles and beliefs throughout the different eras of California's cannabis industry. He risked his freedom to provide medicine for his father in the late 90s. He spoke out against corrupt politicians trying to halt the progression of legitimizing the medical marijuana industry in the late 2000s. In the 2010s, he dealt with the feds harassing him as well as other cannabis businesses, then fought the City of L.A. for 13 years in court. And now, in the early 2020s, he once again is speaking up and talking about the influx of corporate interests that are destroying the businesses and the people that created this industry.
So for us, it's like, then to make the announcement again that they're raising taxes again, it's just fucking insane. You know?
Yeah, it hurts the consumer, which is really the only reason this industry exists.
Yeah, you know, they're making it to where the guys with billions of dollars that are playing with a bunch of monopoly money, you know, Canadian money that is not even real, you know, they're making it to where those guys can hold out and survive all these big taxes, and the real people that should be there, the guys who started this industry and the real growers, they can't afford to survive. They can't pay rent and taxes and licensing fees and employees when all their money is going to taxes. You know, all their money is going to fees, all their money is going to 280E and all these different taxes that we have to pay. We don't have billions of dollars, you know, we're not sitting on other people's money. It's our money, you know? So when we have to pay all this money, a lot of these guys are tapping out, they're done, you know? And they shouldn't be done, they should barely be getting into this, they should be getting their steam. But instead, we're all spending our money on taxes, you know? And the problem is where's this tax money going?
Right.
Where's the trail?
Is there hope that Gavin Newsom will listen?
I mean,
is he an improvement over the last party?
Do politicians ever listen to the regular guys? You know what I mean? I think it comes down to who's paying the lobbyist and who's connected to who. You know, we're not politically connected. You know, we don't have any connections.
Right.
You know what I mean? We don't have a store on every corner. We have 2 stores in Los Angeles that we've had for the last 11 years. You know, in those 11 years, we fought the city and the state to keep those stores. You know, and all these guys are coming in with all this money, and all of a sudden they have 75 licenses. You know, they got a store on every corner. Well, how'd you get that? You know, we worked for what we have.
Right.
You know what I mean? What deals had to be made to get those stores? What deals had to be made to have a store on every corner in every city in every single state? You know, so I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
Ivan has for decades been outspoken and protective of the cannabis community and culture, not for reasons like virtue signaling or to get public praise, but because it was the right thing to do. The turbulent and ever-changing laws surrounding cannabis in California didn't build Ivan's character. It more so revealed it and continued to test it. And Ivan has continued to stand on his beliefs and principles he had all those years ago when he first started growing with his mom and then for his dad. You can't not respect the hell out of someone that has stayed consistent in their beliefs and then acted on those beliefs to make positive change, even though many times it would have been way easier not to. Playing with fire, but never his principles. Thank you for watching this episode of the High Design documentary series. I hope you enjoyed this video. In this series, we're going to cover the cannabis industry's greatest minds. Like, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments, who should we cover next? Anyways, really appreciate y'all. This is LMC, signing out.
Yeah, I'm so I know I could go bye, what you tryna go high? I go low when they go high. And I got no fucks, got the shooters on the line. Yeah, roll it up, yeah, smoke it up. Cause I smoke, yeah, I like my life, splice, selling. Money in the know is so heavy.